Everyone, this one was actually brought to my attention by one of my subscribers, Mark David O said 6VS. He mentioned this on my video about the left, political correctness, and grooming gangs, and he asked what was my thoughts on the Jeremy Kyle show returning. I honestly hadn't heard anything about it, so I looked it up and came across this report. I'm going to just read it out, but thank you, Mark, for drawing my attention to that. This is the report. I'll just read it out, and I'm sort of split screening here. The other laptop's being a real nuisance at the moment, so I'm having to sort of work with this. So bear with me. This is from the Manchester Evening News. Jeremy Kyle to make TV comeback 5 years after controversial ITV show axed. The reports by James Holt and Alexandra Snow. Now, before I get into this, just very briefly, I'll put my cards on the table. Anyone who's followed my channel for a while will know I've got very strong views on the Jeremy Kyle show. I think it was one of the worst things that ever aired on British television. I think it was appalling. Um, and someone looking at my previous videos on crime might think that's strange. Kyle sort of takes a hard line on crime. So do you. You'd think I'd support him, but absolutely not. And actually, if you're conservative on crime, I would just point out with the Jeremy Kyle show, he paid people to appear, right? So those unpleasant guests, people who were benefit fraudsters or domestic abusers or other obnoxious people, they were paid to go on the show. So that's a contradiction. We're going to denounce them for being benefit frauds, but we're going to give them money to appear on the show. It's a contradiction in the purported message Kyle was trying to get out. But anyway, it's just a report because it may not be as bad as it seems, and I'll come to this in a second. I mean, I'm literally just reading this myself right now as I'm reading this out. Um, Jeremy Kyle is set to make a big comeback to ITV after a 5 year hiatus. The Jeremy Kyle show was a staple of daytime TV before it was abruptly axed in 2019. The daily ITV show was taken off air after the death of Steve Diamond, 63. He was found dead at home 7 days after taking part in the programme. Diamond's death, attributed to an overdose and heart problems, sparked conversations about Kyle's treatment of guests on the show. The TV presenter 59 hinted at his return on a social media post this week. Um, on his Instagram, he posted a behind the scenes shot of him next to a large ITV sign. The post cryptically had no caption. Reports say that Jeremy will be a guest feature on Kate Garraway's new series of life stories, according to the Daily Star. The Good Morning Britain host is said to delve into Jeremy's career and personal life during the one-on-one interview. A source informed The Sun he filmed with Kate this week and was really open and honest about everything he's been through. Everyone will be thrilled to see him back at ITV. It's a great episode. Life Stories has ran since 2009 when Piers Morgan hosted and interviewed a range of celebrities, including Katie Price, Kelly Holmes, Simon Cowell, Mel B and Freddie Flintoff. Kate Garraway was Piers' last guest in 2021 before she took over as host. Since then, Kate has hosted two series herself featuring celebrities such as John Barnes and Ruby Wax. In September last year, a coroner judged that there was no direct link between the Jeremy Kyle show and Steve Diamond's death. Jeremy Kyle came out in relief and said his name had finally been cleared. After discussing how Diamond's death impacted him, Kyle said, "We must never forget that a man died, but it's been proven there was nothing whatsoever to do with me. For 2 years, it was horrific, and I had a complete breakdown. I'm not going to spend my life apologizing for a show that 30,000 people came on and loved and millions around the world watched." Um, this just shows what a absolute shit Jeremy Kyle is. I was going to actually call him a name of an animal there, but honestly, it would be misplaced. It would be unfair. On I despise Jeremy Kyle, to be quite blunt about it. I despise the man. I think he's a charlatan. I think he's an absolute hypocrite. Um, for him to whine about how hard his life has been, how? How? He has had the enjoyment of his supporters. He ran away from a parliamentary inquiry because he's fundamentally a card. He can dish out abuse, but he can't take it. Um, Regarding this report, it's a bit vague on the details. I mean, he's appearing on Kate Garraway's life stories. I hope she grills him. Although, if it's ITV, then it'll probably be a pat on the back. Um, the thing is, Kyle hasn't exactly gone away in the last 5 years. He's been on talk TV, talk radio, and so he's never really had it. He talks about the ordeal he's been through. This is actually disgusting, considering what he's put some of his guests through. For him to whine about an ordeal, Jeremy Kyle is a despicable character. And the point I always make about that show, I don't care if there was some reconciliation and some good came out of it. Maybe he got some addicts into treatment programs or something. Does that really justify the carnival of cruelty, the way he exploited people's emotions, the way he played games with people's lives, really? Um, it's a fact that some of those guests were, I say some, probably more than some, were misled. Um, Now, in terms of the man who died, Kyle's fans say, oh, well, he made the decision to take his own life. Suicide is a terrible thing. It's the biggest cause of death for men in Britain under 50. Mr. Diamond was a bit older, but the fact of the matter is he'd been portrayed as a liar. He failed the lie detector test. There is a reason lie detector tests are not used in courts of law, because they're not foolproof. And one of the disgusting things about that show was over reliance on lie detector tests. It was theatrical. Or this person's failed a lie detector test. But regardless of whether Mr. Diamond was telling the truth or not, he was vilified on national television. And ITV, being the absolute creeps that they are, actually claim, oh, we have support networks for the guests. These sanctimonious hypocrites are the very same people who put the guests through that turmoil in the first place. And there's always this thing people will say, well, no one forced them to go on; they chose to go on the show. Well, that wears a bit. That's a bit of a weak argument when they're misled, right? So if you're choosing to do something because you understand it to be in a certain context, and then there's something different actually happens, the whole free choice argument becomes a bit thin. And that's one of the things I despised about that show. It misled people. For instance, one man was told that he was going to be reconciled with his partner, and what does Kyle do? He parades their new partner on TV. It ended up with one man getting assaulted. The other guy headbutted him, basically. He was charged with common assault. But I mean, so I'm not justifying assault, but that situation was brought about by Kyle stoking up people's emotions. And for this scumbag, that's what I figured Jeremy Kyle, he's a scumbag. For him to whine about what he's been through, he's a millionaire. He's become a millionaire out of other people's struggles. He's an absolute parasite. He is the lowest of the low. He is a despicable creep. I hate Jeremy Kyle, quite honestly. And I know it's not good to go around hating people, but in his case, I freely admit it. I hate the man. I think he's despicable. Um, this is not because I sympathise with the guests. Some of them are utterly obnoxious. You get domestic abusers, you get thugs, you get unpleasant people. My point is they should be judicially punished. So what I'm saying in this video is no contradiction to what I've said in the last video regarding criminal justice. I do not think that criminals should be paraded on TV as a sort of form of entertainment. It's just, and then you get people who are, I do think, are mentally vulnerable. I don't care what ITV says. I believe they're motivated solely by ratings. Solely by ratings. I don't think there's much safeguarding in ITV. They do occasionally produce good productions. I've seen a few decent dramas that they've come out with, but the fact that they have promoted the Jeremy Kyle show and there's no real remorse for it. As for this thing about no causal link, well, the man's cause of death would have been his suicide. Um, it may be that he had pre-existing heart problems, but the fact that the coroner didn't find any causal link doesn't mean that Kyle has no culpability whatsoever. I mean, if someone has a heart problem and you give them a shock, you jump out from a door. Um, to say that that's, I just think to say that there's absolutely no culpability for Kyle is a bit of a cop out. I'm not saying the coroner didn't do the job, but it's a convenient excuse for Kyle. I mean, this absolute worm of a man, it's crocodile tears. That's the other thing. He doesn't give a damn about Mr. Diamond. He really doesn't care. All he cares about is it meant his show got axed. Kyle is a crocodile. He has no compassion, in my opinion, for the people whose lives he messes with. And again, his fans will say, "Oh, but he's got people under drug programs. He's reconciled feuding uh, partners and so." I don't care what good it's done. It doesn't balance out the bad. It doesn't justify. You can't say, well, there's all this good stuff. Also, let's just turn a blind eye to the fact that he's messing with people's lives. That he's bringing them on a show, getting his obnoxious audience, and I have always held them just as responsible. You know, what sort of person are you if you're paying to be an audience member of a show so that you can gloat and jeer at someone else? I think you're a bit of a card. I think that's a cowardly thing to do. I suppose the only caveat I would make is if someone then perhaps if the topic of the show was domestic abuse and they'd been victims of that, I suppose they'd have a vested interest in it. But I still am very cynical about that sort of setup. We have this baying mob, which is the studio audience. It's it's disgusting. And the whole argument about popularity again, it's a flawed argument. Public hangings were once popular in this country. Just because something's popular doesn't mean it's morally justified. Um, because frankly, some people have very low values. They don't. I honestly believe, at the risk of sounding it's self-righteous, but I do wonder about people who get a kick out of finding entertainment in others' emotional turmoil. I just think that's a bit sick. Um, those guests, the obnoxious ones, they should be facing judicial consequences for their actions. If they're a domestic abuser, they should be in jail. If they're committing benefit fraud, they can be, get their benefits cut or something. But for them to be paraded on the Jeremy Kyle show, it's just Kyle is a parasite of the worst kind. He's a disgusting creep, in my opinion. Um, I don't know if this actually means the show is coming back. I really, really hope it isn't coming back in the same format. But the very fact that Kyle's getting a platform again is bad enough. I don't think he deserves that. Um, And there's all this focus on Steve Diamond's death, but what about all the other people who were left feeling humiliated, who were left, whose mental health was played with by Jeremy Kyle? Remember, Jeremy Kyle's not a therapist. He's not a criminologist. He's not a police officer. He's not a judge. He had absolutely no qualifications whatsoever to do what he'd done. His only background, as far as I can gather, will say he was a journalist in the West Midlands of sorts. I see no criteria that qualified him to do what he done on that show. And playing God, playing judge, jury, and executioner was particularly obnoxious. So I hope Kate Garraway has the guts to actually press Kyle and hammer him on some of his own biographic details. He had a gambling problem. I hope she presses him on that. Give him a taste of his own medicine. I don't think she will. ITV, that it's all patting each other on the back. I'm disgusted by it, to be quite honest. I'm going to be cautiously optimistic and hope that this doesn't mean the show is returning in the same format. If it does, absolute shame on ITV. Shame on them. In 2019, even the tabloids were saying the Kyle show is finished forever. It will never return. If they bring this back, they haven't learned a damn thing. And it's a disgrace. It would be thoroughly depressing and it will shame ITV for doing that because it will just show that they do not have a duty of care. They don't. And I suppose you could argue this is a problem on some level with a lot of reality TV shows, Celebrity Love Island, etc. I watch Traitors now. Traitors can Traitors can have an edge where there's a lot of acrimony between the contestants. There is a fundamental difference. Traitors is a game show. Where there is acrimony, it's all entirely within the context of the show, i.e., who has been, being a team player, who's been pulling the weight, who do we not trust. It can get a bit personal, but I do think there's a big, big difference between that and what goes on in the Jeremy Kyle show, where people's personal lives, are dragged into the show. It's just I would say one final thing. If you are having serious problems with your relationship or other issues, I would urge you. I mean, I can't tell other people what to do, but I would urge you, do not go on the Jeremy Kyle show. Do not give this parasite the time of day because he is the one benefiting. I mean, if you want to be humiliated on national TV, if you really want to go through that, up to you. But surely your audience is going to jeer at you. You know, you might get a little bit of money, you might get hotel accommodation in Manchester, but is it worth going through that ordeal? I would say it isn't. And, you know, it's up to them to decide. But um if this show returns in the same format, you know, that talk show format, I'm hoping this just means that Kyle's getting some sort of other show. It's bad enough. I don't think he should get any show, but at least if it's not the same format, that's. I mean, if it's him going out interviewing gang members or something, that's not too bad. But that format, if ITV brings that back, it will be an absolute damning disgrace. It will just show that they're putting popularity and ratings above ethics. And it will be, you know, absolute shameful of ITV producers. Shameful. And if the show has more suicides, then this idea that there's no causal link, it's deranged. I mean, you cannot say that someone who's humiliated on national TV, whose son mentioned that he expressed distress in the days after the show, you know, he expressed being deeply humiliated and feeling he had the whole world was against him. Frankly, whether he lied or not is irrelevant. The fact is, it's a cruel experiment. It's a cruel carnival. I hate it. And I love Jeremy Kyle. I think the man's a vulture. Um, and it says something about our society that people like him get a platform, and there's other people out there who don't get the same sort of voice that deserve it a lot more than he does. Um, so yeah, thank you, Mark, for drawing my attention to that. But it's an unfortunate development. I just hope it means that it won't be in the same format. I can sort of put it aside if Kyle has a show, but it isn't the same format. But if it's the same format, if it's him standing up, getting guests on, and that ghastly studio audience berating them, that will be depressing, and it will just show that ITV disgracefully hasn't learnt a damn thing. It shows that they will have put their ethics aside. If that is the case, I'll be writing a strongly worded letter to them or some sort of formal correspondence. In fact, I might even do it as a preliminary. So let me know your thoughts. It's depressing development. I mean, I really did think in 2019 that was it. They'll never bring it back. Tabloids even were saying that at the time. Maybe they think because this coroner has ruled as he did. Oh well, we're in the green light there, but that doesn't explain all the other people who's been messed with by this show. Um, it's I love it. I think it's the worst thing that's ever aired on British television. And there's a few other competitors, but I think, yeah, I put it at the very top. It's despicable. And I'm just going to be repeating myself now, so I'll wrap this up.